I used to be a princess. Not the kind who posed for portraits while candlelight turned her hair into a crown of gold. Mine was a quieter kind of royalty. Threads of duty, grain ledgers, and border rumors, the constant weight of being watched even when I was alone. In my father's kingdom, I learned to read people the way others learned to read maps. Their mouths told one truth, their hands told another. Then the conqueror arrived. Kael Draven took my country with a brutality that didn't need cruelty to be terrifying. His army moved like an omen. His wolves, his pack, didn't just follow orders. They behaved as if they could smell intent itself. When his captains spoke, they spoke with the certainty of men who already knew the answer. And when Kael looked at me, it wasn't like being seen. It was like being catalogued, assessed for value. I was a princess conquered. He was the conqueror with the throne. At first, I told myself I could survive by being useful. I could translate decrees. I could smooth tensions between his soldiers and our starving villages. I could keep my father's remaining supporters from turning into knives in the dark. I could endure the humiliation. But humiliation doesn't kill you as quickly as betrayal does. It started with the accusations during the winter feast. There had been a truce for 3 months, thin as ice, but real enough that people breathed a little easier. Kael hosted in his keep, where the walls were newer and the shadows felt borrowed from older nightmares. My absence from the highest seats was deliberate. It reminded everyone who held power. I was made to stand among the conquered, among the women who used to laugh without counting the cost. I carried my posture like armor. I kept my voice measured. I did what I always did. I watched. Vesper Merrick watched back. Vesper was Kael's advisor in the way a knife was a tool, present, precise, and always pointed toward someone else's throat. He had served Kael since the earliest days of conquest. That was what people said. That was what I was meant to believe. But I remembered the way Vesper smiled at rumors like they were food. That night, the air was thick with roasted meat and wine that tasted too sweet. The court's music was bright but thin, as if the strings had been stretched too tight to sing comfortably. Kael stood at the head of the hall, not relaxed, not celebrating. He was something else, something that looked like the beginning of a storm. Vesper leaned close to me while servants passed behind us with platters. "You're quiet," he murmured, as if I'd disappointed him. "Quiet women are always hiding something." My hands didn't twitch, my face didn't change. I kept my eyes on the candles. "Then you've mistaken my silence for secrecy," I replied. His gaze slid over my collarbone where my faint crescent scar sat under my dress like a secret bruise. He didn't touch me. He didn't need to. His interest was a weight. "Princesses carry secrets," he said, "even when conquered." I should have ignored him. I should have known better than to listen, because later, when the hall's laughter reached a crescendo and the guard's attention drifted toward the center of the room, someone set a ring on the floor by my feet. A simple circlet of dark metal, etched with a pattern like roots gripping stone. No one saw who placed it. Of course no one saw. The way they accused me wasn't clumsy. It wasn't even passionate. It was practiced. Cold certainty with theatrical timing. A captain's voice cut through the music. "Your Highness," he began, and then his words broke into accusation. "We found this at your feet." The ring glinted when the candles shifted. It looked wrong in the warm light, like it belonged to a different world. My throat tightened. My fingers curled, not around the ring, but into my sleeves so no one could see the tremor. "I didn't place it here," I said. My voice came out steady. I'd trained it for court years. But steadiness doesn't persuade people who've already decided. Kael's eyes tracked to me. His expression didn't soften. It sharpened, as if the accusation gave him a weapon. Then the air changed. Not the hall's temperature, not the scent of wine. The space between heartbeats. I felt it in my skin like a subtle electricity, like my body recognized something my mind couldn't name. The ring's etched pattern pulsed faintly, so faintly that only someone like me would notice. I had always felt magic as a pressure behind my ribs. My mother used to call it intuition, but she never explained why her hands shook whenever she touched the hidden pouch that I was born with. That pouch was gone now. The ring on the floor was like a key turning in a lock inside me. I inhaled, my breath caught, and the accusation became a sentence. "Traitor," someone hissed from the conquered crowd. "The curse returns," another whispered. Curse. I'd never been told what my pouch contained. I'd only been told to keep it safe, to keep my body, my blood, unmixed with enemy magic. My father had called it protection. Now it was being called a curse. Vesper stepped forward as if he'd choreographed the scene. "My king," he said, voice smooth as oiled steel. "She carries something. Look at her. The ring is responding." Responding, as if I were a lock and they held the key. Kael didn't move, but the hall's animals reacted. Wolves weren't allowed in the feast, not openly, not in the way people imagined stories about beasts in castles. But Kael's presence drew them close to the walls anyway. I could feel it, the pack pressing in on the edges of sound. One of the guards shifted uneasily. Another woman, one of my former attendants, made a choked sound like she was trying to stop crying without being caught. My vision blurred at the corners. I realized something with a cold clarity. This wasn't only about punishing me. It was about proving Kael could be threatened, about making him doubt his own rule. A captain grabbed my arm. His fingers were too hard, too familiar. He treated me like I was already broken. "Take her," he ordered. They didn't drag me like a prisoner. They moved me like a display, like a conclusion. Kael's eyes never left mine. His beast, his wolf nature, stirred behind them. I didn't see it with my eyes. I felt it in the way the air thickened when he breathed. Then he looked away. He didn't stop it. That might have been the worst part, because I had begun to believe, in my stubborn way, that survival could be negotiated with respect. I'd imagined that if I kept my head down, if I worked, if I didn't provoke, maybe Kael would treat me as a person. He treated me as a problem. They stripped me of my princess's rings and replaced them with plain leather ties. They took my cloak. They took my pouch. Then they threw me out. Not into a cell, not into a noble exile where people could whisper sympathy. They threw me past the last gate into the conquered kingdom's borderland, where winter lived like a predator. The snow there didn't fall, it invaded. By dawn, I was hungry in the way that makes your thoughts feel thin and sharp. I walked anyway. I had no map. I had only the memory of roads and old family pathways that I'd taken as a child. The border forests waited like teeth. I tried to stay quiet. Quiet women survive. That was the lesson. But my power tugged at me. It didn't wake like fire. It woke like water finding a crack. Under my skin, there was warmth that didn't belong to my body. It pressed against my bones, remembering what it was supposed to protect. At the edge of the forest, where the trees grew thick and the snow became tangled on branches like ghost hair, I saw movement. Not wolves. Men. Vesper's men. I knew the shape of their weapons. I knew the way they carried themselves like they belonged to a court that never admitted mistakes. "You shouldn't be here," one of them said, voice too casual. "Your Highness, the king doesn't want you." I swallowed. My mouth tasted like cold iron. "What do you want?" I asked. He grinned, slow and cruel. "We want what you're carrying." Carrying. They didn't know the pouch was gone. They didn't know the ring wasn't the same as the pouch. Or maybe they did and it didn't matter, because they believed I was a vessel for something powerful. The enemy always called power a curse until it could be used. Then he stepped closer. "I can smell it on you," he added. "That echo of magic, that royal inheritance." Royal inheritance. My heart kicked hard. I had spent years believing I was ordinary beyond my bloodline. I had spent years waiting for a hidden future I didn't understand. But my body understood now. My scar warmed. The crescent under my collarbone pulsed, like the ring's pattern had laid a finger on it. I raised my chin. "I don't have anything." He laughed. You do. You just don't know how to hold it. His men closed in. I should have run. I should have fought. But my power didn't feel like brute strength. It felt like recognition. It felt like an oath. So I did something else. I spoke. Not in the language of court, not in the sharp commands of soldiers. I spoke softly, as if I was addressing something sleeping. Stop, I whispered. The air thickened. The nearest man's breath hitched. His eyes widened with sudden fear, not of me, but of what my words had touched. I didn't understand it. I only felt it. Their boots scraped backward on snow. One of them dropped his sword. It clattered, a sound too sharp for the quiet forest. The power in my blood wasn't attacking them with violence. It was pushing against their choices. It was making my presence harder to ignore. They retreated, stumbling like their legs belonged to someone else. I should have fled then. I should have taken advantage. But I was shaken, not by what happened, but by what it implied. If my body could do that, then the ring wasn't simply a trap. It was a trigger, and someone had been planning to trigger me. That night, I walked until my legs burned. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to the court that had called me traitor. I couldn't go back to the king who had let them throw me away. In the distance, I heard thunder. Not weather thunder, wolves. A howl rolled through the trees like a blade drawn slowly, then another. The forest's silence became a listening silence. I froze, breath caught. Kael's pack. I had felt them before, even when I wasn't meant to know. Now the sound was close enough that I smelled wet fur and ironed snow. I should have hidden. I didn't. The power under my skin surged again, responding to their presence like it recognized old allies. Then a shadow moved between the trees, too large to be only Wolf. The snow parted for him like it didn't want to touch his boots. Kael walked out as if he owned the forest. No armor, no parade, just a dark coat that drank the light, and eyes that didn't bother pretending to be gentle. His gaze swept past the men who'd retreated, past the broken sword in the snow. Finally, it landed on me. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his wolf nature surged. I saw it in the way the pack behind him tightened, in the way their bodies formed a living wall. They didn't bare teeth at me. They watched me like I was precious, like I was dangerous, but not like a threat, like a truth. Kael approached slowly, as if he knew sudden movement might shatter something fragile inside me. I forced myself not to flinch. I didn't ask to be found, I said. His mouth didn't curve. His voice didn't have warmth, but it had control. You were easy to find. I blinked. I was thrown out. He stared for a long time, and the pack shifted as if even they were listening for the answer. Finally, he said, "You were never meant to reach this place alone." My laugh came out bitter. Then why did they put me here? Kael's eyes flicked, just once, toward the direction where my enemy's men had gone. He didn't explain. He didn't accuse. He only stepped closer until I could smell cedar smoke and cold steel on him. When he stopped, the air between us tightened, like it was deciding whether to become a bond or a cage. "I could leave you," he said quietly. My heart stumbled, not from hope, but from anger. "Then do it." He looked at me as if I'd thrown a challenge into his path. And then his beast moved. Not physically, not like a person ripping free. The wolves around us pressed closer, not to trap me, but to shelter me from the wind. Their bodies lowered into a protective arc. Kael's gaze never left my face. "I won't," he said. It wasn't a promise meant to soothe. It was a decision meant to survive. I should have asked what changed. I should have asked why he'd allowed my accusation. But I felt something else. His walls were thick. Not indifference thick. Fear thick. Fear of the truth. Fear of what my magic might do. He turned his head slightly, signaling the pack. Two wolves nudged snow away from a path, clearing space through drifts as if the forest itself had become an escort. Kael gestured once, and his men, his own, appeared from between trees. They moved with quiet competence. One carried a cloak, another carried a small bundle that smelled like dried herbs. I didn't accept it right away. I had survived exile by refusing comfort. I had survived betrayal by refusing to trust. When I finally stepped forward, it wasn't because Kael had ordered me to. It was because my body was freezing and my pride was tired. The cloak wrapped around me, thick and warm, absorbing the cold like it didn't belong on me. The fabric smelled faintly of smoke and pine. Kael watched me as if he expected me to dissolve. I didn't. I straightened. "What happens now?" I asked. His answer came after a pause. "Now you come with me." "And if I refuse?" Kael's eyes darkened. His pack tightened. I felt the weight of his power in the ground under my feet. But he didn't react like a tyrant. He reacted like a man holding back a storm. "You can refuse," he said, "but you won't survive the next night alone." That wasn't cruelty, it was truth. And truth, after enough lies, becomes its own kind of kindness. So I followed. I walked beside Kael through the snow, toward his keep where conquered walls became a fortress of new rules. As we moved, my power calmed for a while. The pulse under my scar softened, like it was letting me catch my breath. But the calm wasn't peace, it was preparation. When we reached the edge of the keep, the guards stopped me instinctively. Their eyes widened when they saw Kael's expression. He didn't issue commands loudly. He didn't need to. One look from him was enough. The gates opened. Inside, the keep smelled of stone, smoke, and leather. The corridors were darker than my memory of my own palace. Here, the shadows didn't feel like absence. They felt like occupancy. Kael led me toward a chamber set aside for the king's personal protection. Not a prison, not a guest room, a place designed to control danger. When the door closed behind us, the sound of the outside world cut off like a severed thread. Kael stood near the hearth, still as a weapon. His eyes tracked my hands. I held my arms close, as if I could keep my power contained through stubbornness. "I'm not your prisoner," I said. "I'm not your judge," he answered. The honesty of it nearly made me angry, because honesty implies you could have done better before. Still, I couldn't ignore the way his beast, whatever it was in him, kept reacting to me. The hearth's warmth seemed to lean toward my skin. The air around me felt thinner, like magic recognized me and didn't want to waste effort. Kael took one step closer. "Your scar," he said. I tensed. "It's nothing." His eyes didn't leave mine. "Nothing doesn't answer wolves." My throat tightened. So he had noticed too. He had felt it, even if he didn't understand it. "I didn't ask for this," I said. Kael's jaw flexed. He looked away for a moment, just a moment, and in that flicker of restraint, I saw a piece of him I didn't know how to hate. Wounded pride, wounded courage. He had been shaped by war and suspicion. I had been shaped by courts and betrayal. Two broken things. But broken things don't become whole unless someone chooses to mend them. "What do you want from me?" I asked. Kael's gaze returned. "For now, stay alive." It should have sounded like dismissal. Instead, it sounded like devotion hidden under iron. I didn't say anything. I only watched the way his pack waited outside the door, silent as guards who didn't trust the world not to steal what their king had claimed. Hours later, when I finally slept, it wasn't easy. I expected dreams of the feast, dreams of the ring pulsing on the floor, dreams of my attendants laughing while soldiers dragged me away. But I dreamed of something else. I dreamed of a forest that didn't hate me. I dreamed of wolves circling like guardians, and in the dream, I wasn't asking for rescue. I was choosing what to protect. When I woke, dawn light spilled through high windows. My skin was warm under the blanket Kael's servants had left. I sat up too fast, then froze as dizziness swept through me. I rubbed my collarbone. The crescent scar had faded into something less angry, still there but less like an open wound. In the corner of the room, a bowl of water and cloth waited. I stared at it for a long moment.
No one had told me to wash.
No one had told me to eat. Yet the room offered care like it knew I needed it. I stood, carefully, like I was afraid the act of surviving might trigger punishment. When I rinsed my hands, I noticed something strange in the mirror. Not my face, my eyes. They were the same winter gray steel, but in the center, a faint shimmer moved under my gaze, like ink swirling in water. I leaned closer. My breath fogged the mirror. The shimmer pulsed. A memory rose uninvited. My mother's hands when she touched the hidden pouch, the way her fingers trembled. "Don't let anyone take it," she whispered to me once, years ago, "because it's not meant for kings. It's meant for the chosen protector." Chosen protector? But protector of what? Kael wasn't just a conqueror. He was a king with enemies inside his own court, and I had been used as bait. I needed the truth, so I went to find it. I dressed in simple, warm clothes and stepped into the corridor. The guards recognized me now, because Kael's presence rewrote rules around him, but their eyes still held suspicion. I walked past them with my chin lifted. An ordinary princess doesn't do that. An ordinary exiled woman doesn't do that. But I had learned that agency is a kind of magic, too. Down the corridor, I heard voices, men, low and sharp. Then my name, Lyra, spoken like a curse. I pressed my ear closer to the door. "The ring signal is stronger," one voice said. Another responded, "If she's carrying the echo, the king will either cage her or kill her. Either way, it's progress." I swallowed. My power stirred like a warning. The enemy didn't want Kael to punish me. They wanted Kael to fear me enough to make a wrong choice. Fear makes kings cruel, or fear makes them reckless. Either way, it breaks stability. Then Vesper's voice slid into the conversation, smooth as ever. "She won't stay. Not when she learns the truth," he said. A pause. Then, "Once the king hears what she really is, we'll have our opening." My skin went cold. What she really is. Vesper didn't sound like he meant my bloodline. He meant my destiny. I stepped back from the door. My stomach churned. I could try to confront them, but confrontation would be the same mistake the court made, assuming my only role was to react. I refused. Instead, I turned away and walked toward the kitchens. It was an ordinary decision: food, water, herbs. But ordinary choices can become extraordinary when power watches. In the kitchens, servants glanced at me. A few looked away quickly, like they were ashamed they ever pitied me. Others watched with cautious hope. No one offered me a task at first. Then an older cook, sturdy, scarred hands, said, "If you want to keep your place, princess, don't hover." My lips tightened. "I'm not hovering." The cook snorted. "Then prove it. There's bread to slice and broth to stir." It would have been easy to refuse. It would have been easy to demand answers. But I had agency now. Real agency. I stepped to the table and began chopping onions. Slow, steady, grounding my breath in the rhythm of work. When the blade hit the board, I focused on the sensation. The solid weight, the wet sting of onion juice, the way my shoulders relaxed when my mind stopped chasing threats. My power responded to the steadiness. It wasn't like fireworks. It was like warmth spreading through my fingers, as if my body found its true language in simple tasks. When the broth simmered, I added herbs with careful precision. The cook watched me, gruff but curious. "Where'd you learn that?" she asked. I kept my eyes on the pot. "Courts teach more than politics," she grunted. "Courts teach greed, too." I didn't argue. Instead, I plated a bowl and carried it out, toward Kael's wing. I expected resistance. I didn't get it. His wolves were stationed near the corridor, massive shadows with eyes like burning embers. They didn't block me. They moved aside as if guiding me. My throat tightened. As I approached Kael's door, I realized something that made my chest ache. They'd escorted me the first time. Now they were escorting me again. His beast recognized me in silence. I set the bowl down on the floor outside the door. Then I stepped back. Kael didn't open the door immediately. Minutes passed. The corridor held its breath. Finally, the door opened a crack. Kael's eyes appeared, sharp, dark, unreadable. "You didn't ask," he said. I swallowed. I didn't need to. His gaze flicked to the bowl, then to my face. His mouth tightened like he was fighting the urge to show gratitude in a way his pride wouldn't survive. He said, "Why?" I stared straight at him. Because I wasn't trying to win him, I was trying to keep myself human. "I don't know what you are," I answered carefully, "but I know what hunger does. It makes lies louder." Kael's eyes darkened. A sound came from behind him, his pack settling, an almost impatient exhale. Kael opened the door wider. He didn't invite me in. He only stepped back enough to let me see the room, dim, guarded. "I shouldn't want you here," he said. My pulse hitched. He didn't say it like desire. He said it like warning, like he feared what my presence meant. "Then don't want," I replied. His eyes snapped to mine. For a moment, something in him shifted. Not kindness, awareness. Then he shut the door, but he didn't lock it. He let it remain open enough for a choice. So I chose. I went into the room. Kael didn't stop me. The air felt charged, like the space between us had become a boundary. I could feel my power brushing against whatever magical wards guarded his keep, and the wards resisted me. Not violently, but firmly, like they were meant to keep a dangerous thing contained. I walked toward the hearth and warmed my hands over it. I refused to look away from him. "You let them accuse me," I said. My voice was steady, but my ribs felt bruised with old rage. "You watched. You didn't stop it." Kael's jaw flexed. "I couldn't," he said. The admission surprised me. "Why?" He inhaled slowly, like the words were sharp enough to cut. "Because the court had magic," he said, "and because I didn't know whether you were a weapon or a victim." I stared at him, shock tightening into something sharper. "You think I'm a weapon?" Kael's eyes didn't flinch. "I think anything with power can be used." My throat burned. "I didn't try to hurt anyone." "I didn't say you did." We stood in a fragile standoff of truth. Then his beast stirred again, restless as a dog ready to tear open a threat. Kael's hand clenched at his side. He forced control. "I have enemies within my walls," he said quietly. "They want your echo. They want to break my claim to the throne." My mind raced. Vesper, the ring, the accusation. I had been framed because my power answered the ring signal. Because if I was seen as cursed, Kael would hesitate, and hesitation is an opening. "Who?" I asked. Kael's gaze shifted toward the shadows near the window, not toward the door, toward something in the room, something hidden. Then he said Vesper's name like it tasted bitter. "Vesper Merrick." My hands trembled once, then steadied. Vesper had smiled when my life was collapsing. He had used my exile as a doorway. "I need to know what I carry," I said. Kael hesitated, and in that hesitation, I understood the shape of his fear. If he told me, it might make me a target. If he kept it from me, I might become something Vesper could control. Kael's pride wanted distance. His beast wanted protection. So he chose a middle path. "Come closer," he said. My stomach twisted. I didn't move at first. Instead, I asked, "If I do, will you lie?" Kael's eyes sharpened. "No." That answer wasn't comforting. It was dangerous, because it sounded like the truth mattered. I stepped forward. Kael reached toward my collarbone, slow, careful, as if he knew I'd been handled roughly enough already. He didn't grab. He only touched the crescent scar with 2 fingers. The moment his skin met mine, the room changed. The hearth flared. The shadows pulled back. The wards around us responded to my magic like they were recognizing a rightful heir. A pulse surged through me. Not pain, recognition. My vision flickered, images slipping past like memories that weren't mine. My mother's face, a hidden chamber beneath the old palace, a promise spoken in a language older than court, a promise about a protector who would either save the conqueror or destroy him. Kael sucked in a breath. His hand tightened, then released quickly, like he'd realized he'd gone too far. His eyes were fixed on my face like he was trying to read me through my skin. "What did you see?" he asked. I swallowed, throat tight with fear and wonder.
I don't know, I admitted.
But I think the ring wasn't meant for me alone. Kael's expression turned colder. "Neither was the accusation," he said. Then his beast surged again, not toward me, toward the door. A sound, soft, almost polite, came from outside, knuckles on wood. A servant voice said, "My king, Vesper Merrick requests an audience." Kael didn't answer. He only turned his head slightly, eyes still on me. "You carry the echo," he said. "That echo is meant to bind to a protector knot. The kingdom's old wards chose you." My heart pounded. Protector knot. Why? Kael's jaw flexed. "I don't know all the reasons," he admitted, "but I know what the court fears. If your power binds to me, I become more than a conqueror. I become unbreakable." Unbreakable. That word hit like a threat, because unbreakable also means uncontrollable. And Vesper wanted Kael breakable, so he would use me, so he would make me unstable. I forced myself to breathe.
Then you'll never let me leave,
I said. Kael's eyes sharpened. "I won't," he corrected. That tiny correction sounded like choice, like he wasn't saying I was trapped, he was saying he would ensure my survival. But survival with no freedom can become another cage. So I stepped back from his touch. I looked at him, truly looked. "You're scared too," I said. Kael's expression didn't change, but his beast stilled for a fraction, as if it hadn't expected my courage to find it. "I am," he replied. My anger softened into something raw, understanding. The king wasn't my savior by fate. He was just another broken person trying not to become a monster. We heard the door creak, not open, creak, like someone tested it. Kael's hand rose, not to strike, but to signal his pack. The wolves outside shifted. A low growl rolled through the stone. The servant voice repeated, "Vesper requests." Kael cut him off. "He can wait." Silence. The tension in the room tightened like drawn wire. Then Kael turned to me again. "From this moment," he said, voice low, "you will listen to me, and you will speak only when you choose. If I ask you to stay, you will stay. If I ask you to rest, you will rest. Not because I command you, because I need you whole." My throat tightened. That sounded like control, but it also sounded like an oath he was afraid to make too loudly. "I choose," I said. Kael's gaze held mine, then the smallest, hardest nod. "Good." The word "good" wasn't warmth, but it was permission. For the next days, proximity became a cage and a shelter at once. Kael didn't parade me through his court. He didn't display me as a prize. He kept me close enough that his wards and pack could protect me, but far enough that I could breathe. He taught me how to recognize the moments my power surged, not through spells, through ordinary things. He had me stir the broth to steady my heartbeat. He had me hum while I worked, soft tones that anchored the echo so it didn't scream inside my bones. He asked me to mend torn fabrics, to press stitched seams flat with patience, because my magic liked repetition. And slowly, my control returned. My agency grew. I learned that my power wasn't only something done to me, it was something I could shape. But Vesper didn't wait quietly. He struck at the border between my exile and Kael's protection. One night, Kael woke suddenly. I heard his breath change, the way the pack's heartbeat shifted too. Then the room filled with a smell like burned parchment. My magic flared. A shadow moved near the window, someone standing where there should have been no access. Vesper. His smile was almost lazy. "My king," he said, voice carrying through the chamber like smoke. "You keep her close. How romantic." Kael's eyes turned ice. Vesper's gaze slid to me. "You," he said, as if we were old friends who shared gossip. "You were supposed to be a key, not a conscience." I swallowed fear, then forced my voice to steady. "You framed me." Vesper chuckled. "Framed? No. I simply revealed the truth the court was too blind to see." My hands clenched. I didn't move toward him. I didn't need to, because my power rose with my stillness. The air thickened. The wards near Kael's walls began to hum. Vesper's smile faltered for the first time. "Don't," he warned. That single word told me everything. He feared my echo. He didn't fear me as a person. He feared what I could unlock. Kael stepped between Vesper and me, not like a shield, like a declaration. "You won't take her," Kael said. Vesper's gaze flicked to Kael's throat, to the mark of power there. "You can't stop what's already chosen." Chosen. My heart pounded. Chosen by the wards. Chosen by some old promise. Chosen by destiny that had been turned into a weapon. I stared at Vesper. "What do you want?" I asked. Vesper's eyes gleamed. "To break the king. To prove his claim is counterfeit. To use your echo to sever the protector knot." Protector knot? I turned toward Kael, breath tight. He didn't answer directly. He only looked at me like he was waiting for my choice. Then I understood. Kael was the conqueror, but the protector knot didn't belong to conquest. It belonged to a truth older than war. If I was bound to him, it would legitimize his reign. That would crush Vesper. So Vesper tried to make me a curse again, a traitor, a girl who couldn't be trusted, a girl the king had already let go. My anger flared, not at Kael, at the lie, at the way Vesper had treated my life like an instrument. I closed my eyes. I focused on ordinary things, broth simmering, cloth mending, the steady rhythm of humming. Then I opened them again. "My power isn't yours," I said. Vesper laughed, but it was thin now. "It's already in you. You think you're in control?" I stepped closer to the wards. Kael didn't stop me. He watched, breath held. The pack shifted, ears angled toward me. I felt the echo inside my scar surge. It reached for something it had been built to bind to. But it didn't just bind. It listened. To my voice, to my heartbeat, to the choices I made. So I made a choice. I hummed. The sound wasn't pretty. It wasn't meant to impress. It was meant to anchor. As I hummed, the wards brightened like ink under moonlight. Vesper flinched. "What did you—" he began. I didn't answer. I let my power pull itself into order. The protector knot responded. Kael's mark flared faintly at his throat. His walls came down, just a fraction. He didn't say feelings. He didn't say love. He only stood with the steadiness of a king who finally accepted his destiny. "Lyra," he said, and my name sounded like a vow. I breathed in. The echo calmed. Vesper staggered back as the wards slammed shut around his magic like a door locking. He hissed a curse. Then he smiled again, because betrayal always tries to recover through performance. "You think you won?" he asked. Kael's eyes were cold. "I think you're done." Vesper's smile widened, and that was the twist that chilled me, because Vesper didn't look defeated. He looked satisfied, like this had been the first step. Then his gaze flicked toward me. "Now," he whispered, "the court will remember her." He vanished in a ripple of darkness, leaving only burned parchment smell and trembling wards. Kael turned toward me. His hands hovered, not touching. He looked furious, not with me, with himself, with his hesitation. I didn't let him drown in it. I walked closer until I was within reach. "I can't undo what they did," I said. Kael's voice was rough. I should have stopped it. My throat tightened. You couldn't, I countered, because I refused to let blame become another weapon we used against each other. But you can decide what happens now. Kael stared at me. Then he nodded once, like he was sealing a pact. The next morning, he summoned the court. Not to punish me, not to display me, to reveal the truth. I didn't stand behind him like a conquered ornament. I stood beside him. The procession was tense, every eye measuring my face for the shape of guilt. The old attendants who had whispered cruelty bowed or pretended to. Some looked at me like I was already dead. Some looked like they'd been waiting for someone to blame. Vesper was absent, but his absence felt staged, like he'd already set the next trap. When Kael spoke, his voice carried through the throne room like thunder muffled by stone. He didn't accuse Vesper directly, he accused the magic that had latched onto the feast. He announced that the ring signal wasn't evidence of treason, it was evidence of the protector not responding. Then his wards activated, not with fireworks, with truth. A line of light traced from my scar up into the air, hovering like a constellation made of ink. The court gasped. Some fell silent in awe. Others, those tied to Vesper, looked frightened, because magic that reveals destiny also reveals guilt. They had wanted me cursed, because cursed girls were easy to discard. But I wasn't cursed. I was chosen. And once chosen, you can't be erased. I watched faces change. Aunties who'd mocked my silence blinked like they were seeing a ghost. Captains who'd grabbed my arms looked away. Kael's pack stood outside the throne room doors, listening like a living judge. Kael turned his gaze to the council. The one who orchestrated the ring, he said, will answer to my pack. The words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like inevitability. Then I felt it. A tremor in the wards, a second presence. Not Vesper, someone else, someone close. Then I realized the shocking twist that made my stomach drop. Vesper hadn't worked alone. He had people inside Kael's halls, people who wore loyalty like a mask. And one of them stepped forward when the lights flickered. Not a man with a polished smile, a woman. Her eyes were wet with something that looked like grief. "My king," she said, voice trembling. "I believed I was saving you." Saving him. My fingers curled. I recognized the woman. She had been one of the court's quiet advisors during my imprisonment. She had given me bread once in a way that seemed kind. I had thanked her. I had believed her. The betrayal wasn't only one person. It was a system. Kael's jaw tightened. You were instructed to test her. The woman flinched. And if she failed? She whispered. It would prove the conqueror was weak. My heart twisted. This was why they framed me. It wasn't just to use my power. It was to humiliate Kael, to prove his walls could be manipulated. My agency rose like flame. I stepped forward, not to confront directly, with hostility, to claim my voice. You didn't protect me, I said, voice clear enough to cut through the throne room's breathless silence. You used me. The woman's gaze snapped to mine. Her expression broke. Fear replaced grief. Because she'd expected me to remain small. Because broken, falsely accused women are supposed to beg. But I didn't. I stood tall. And my power responded. The protector knot steadied, humming under my skin like a vow. Kael's pat growled softly, approval without mercy. The woman began to shake. Then Kael spoke, voice low. You will speak his name. She opened her mouth, but before she could, the lights dimmed. The air turned cold. A dark sigil appeared on the floor, an echo of the ring. Vesper had returned, not physically, through magic. He was inside the walls. He'd left a conduit. He'd planned for this moment. My scar burned, my vision blurred. The echo surged like it was trying to escape my bones. Kael's hand shot out, not to grab me, but to anchor me. His palm pressed gently against my back. Warmth flooded my body. His wards flared in response, And suddenly I knew what the protector knot truly was. It wasn't only destiny, it was consent built into magic. If I fought the echo, it would turn feral. If I accepted my role, it would transform. But I had to choose. I couldn't be forced. I couldn't be used. So I breathed and made the decision. I hummed. The sigil shuddered. Vesper's shadow form appeared for a heartbeat, his grin visible, his eyes gleaming like someone watching a play. "You still think you can control it?" he sneered. I kept humming. My voice steadied. "I think I can choose what it protects," I said. The echo snapped into order. The sigil collapsed. Vesper screamed, more surprised than pained because he hadn't expected the knot to respect my agency. Then he vanished like a lie uncovered. Silence fell. The throne room held its breath. Kael stepped closer. His face was still hard, still intimidating, still kingly. But his beast, his pack, was softer now. Not because he'd won, because he'd seen me survive. He placed both hands on my shoulders, careful as a man handling something sacred. His thumbs brushed gently across my collarbone scar. My power settled under his touch like water finding its deepest bed. I couldn't pretend I didn't feel something shift in me, something that had been locked away since exile. Not romantic in the way stories promise. Real romantic is slower. It is built from trust earned and choices witnessed. I had been cast out. Now I stood in the light. Kael leaned his forehead toward mine, not quite touching, as if he was still afraid his walls might break me. "I let you go," he said quietly. I swallowed against the sting of everything that hurt. "I survived anyway," I replied. His breath shuddered. Then he finally allowed himself to be seen, not with words about feelings, but with the way his hands rested on me like a promise his beast refused to back away from. His pack settled behind him. The wolves lowered their heads at my feet, not bowing like servants, bowing like allies. I looked up at Kael. "What happens to me now?" I asked. Kael's gaze held mine. "You become my mate in truth," he said, voice grave, "and my kingdom becomes something that can't be stolen again." Mate. It was a word the conqueror never used lightly, but the protector knot responded instantly, heat flooding my scar, light humming in my veins. The wards around the throne brightened, recognizing the bond. The court went silent, and this time, the silence wasn't awe. It was acceptance, because destiny didn't ask permission. It only demanded honesty. In the weeks that followed, Kael's walls came down slowly, not through grand speeches, through ordinary days. I helped in the keep, not because I was ordered to, but because I chose to build something new. I learned to guide my power without fear. I learned to hum to soothe the echo when it surged unexpectedly. I learned to touch Kael's wards with my scar and feel them respond like family. And he, Kael, learned to trust his own beast, not the one that could tear enemies apart, the one that could decide that my survival mattered. Sometimes he still went quiet when I looked too closely at the past. Sometimes his pride flared when he remembered he'd watched my exile happen. But every time, he returned. He returned with food placed at my door. He returned with his pack standing in patient shadow outside my room. He returned with small, careful gestures that said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving again." Betrayal tried to find us once more. Old enemies plotted. Vesper's name returned in whispers, as if the lie couldn't fully die. But I wasn't the princess who had been thrown out anymore. I was the chosen protector, the one whose power could bind wards and disrupt traps, the one who carried truth like a blade sheathed in music. And Kael became more than a conqueror. He became a king who didn't build strength only from conquest. He built it from choosing me, over and over, with the steady patience of someone learning how to stop being afraid. One night, beneath a moon that made the keep stones glow pale, I stood beside Kael on the balcony. The air smelled of rain and evergreen. The wolves paced softly below. I felt my scar warm. I hummed a low note into the night. Kael's hand found mine. He didn't squeeze hard. He held like he understood the value of gentleness. His eyes stayed on the horizon, as if he was bracing for battle. But his pack pressed closer, and when he finally spoke, the words weren't about romance. They were about promise. "I won't let them twist you again," he said. I turned my face toward him. "I won't let you become cruel," I replied. Kael's mouth tightened, then softened in the only way he allowed. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, intense without being loud, protective without being possessive. The protector knot hummed in response. The world didn't end in drama, it steadied. And in that steadiness, destiny fulfilled itself. I had been broken and falsely accused. Now I stood at the king's side, not as a victim, as his chosen mate, his protector, and his equal. The conqueror's beast had recognized me first, but it was my voice, my choices, my healing that sealed the bond.